What is going on, fellas? Welcome on into what is usually the college football breakdown show. However, we are not talking football this week. Well, we will later, most likely. We are talking basketball. So, college basketball breakdown show. I guess we have more alliteration in that one. But anyway, college basketball is back this week. It is feast week. And I figured I'm going to be playing college basketball at DFS. I might as well make a little preview video and see what comes of it. So here we are. Disclaimer, I definitely play more college football DFS than I do college basketball. I have been kind of dabbling for a few years in college basketball. I do play it. But I have been making a more intensive effort to get into that this year. I figured I was going to do the research anyway, so I might as well share it. This spreadsheet is new. You're seeing the spreadsheet over here. So it's not perfect. It's not what I quite have down yet. So I have KenPom numbers up top. First, I have the adjusted efficiency margin. So you want to be higher in the plus in that category. That's how you get your KenPom rating. Then we have the offensive ratings, and then their rank overall in the country out of 300, however many teams. Same with defense. That's adjusted offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. And then we have adjusted tempo, something which is super important in college basketball. Tempo is extremely, extremely key. Like you see here, we have Memphis at 12. That's really, really good. And then St. Mary's at 354. That's not usually a team you want to target with a low tempo unless you're getting the guy they go to. Something else I usually look at is usage rate. So what I'll want to have in the future, again, I'm still building this sheet out, but what I want to have in the future is the player stats down here. Most importantly, their usage rating, but also obvious things like minutes, points per game, etc. Because that's usually what you look at in college basketball. You look at the pace, which team should I target, which matchup should I target, and then who has the highest usage rate, who really gets the ball. Along with other obvious statistics. So I'll have that. We have no player stats, obviously, because nobody's played a game. So what I pulled here, props to the three-man weave. Use them a lot for college basketball. They're great. But this is from their website. They have the stats from last year. And again, these aren't exact depth charts. We don't have those in college basketball. These are kind of projections. And then I have some notes over here, which kind of got blocked out by DraftKings, but I'll read those out loud. And those are notes that either I took down as I was researching, or I just copy and pasted directly from Three Man Weave, since I think they have the best previews. So let's get to it. What we have here, we have a 6-game morning slate. So I'm going to be watching college basketball all day. I have Wednesday off. Hopefully you do too. Even if you don't, you can still watch some college basketball. Turn on that television. It's the holidays. It's weird. I don't know if I'm going to be making one of these videos for every single slate. I mean, definitely not, I guess is what I'll say, but I figured this is the tip-off. I'm going to be watching it. I'm going to be spending a little more time, and I was developing this sheet, this model anyway, so might as well make a video here. So anyway, I'm going to do the early game first, 6-game slate. I will timestamp everything, and then I'm going to go over, I guess, what we would call the main slate, which is a 12-game slate later on. So first off, St. Mary's. Does not play at a high tempo, like I mentioned. They are pretty good offensively and defensively. They lose Jordan Ford, so usually they run through a star guard who really takes a lot of the offensive possessions. But this year with Jordan Ford graduated, I'm not sure that's going to be the case. So you could try to target Hughes or Johnson as the next guy, but it seems to me like it's probably not going to be one of them, and if it is, it might take a little while for them to really gain the reins. So that's something I'd be watching closely with this team. But that's not always what St. Mary's is. You'll remember Jock Landale from a few years ago. They will run out of the post if that's their best offensive player. So they're kind of malleable in how they set it up. So this year, my guess would be they're going to run the offense through Matthias Toss, the big man down low. He's the guy who I'd be targeting. I wouldn't have much interest in the guards, although they all are cheap. If I am targeting one, it would be Cuse. I do see Toss has a questionable sign, but I haven't seen any news that he's not playing, so I would go ahead and research that before I play it. I'm going to research it as well. I just saw that right now. But as far as I know, he should be good. Any other guys I'd look at? I mean, Fotu might get some blocks, but you can see here, Toss gets more blocks, same amount of steals, more assists, more rebounds, more points per game, and I would see that going up. I think the offense is going to run through him more this year. Anybody else? I mean, Dukas is a little bit too expensive at 5.1 there. But he played 40 minutes in their last two conference tournament games, which was when the going got tough. The going should probably be tough here versus Memphis. So he's a guy they seem to trust, and he should see a lot of minutes. But his price isn't quite as cheap as I thought he would be. All right, as far as Memphis, coached by Penny Hardaway. They play at a super high pace. You saw there they have the 12th highest pace. Very good defensive team. They were great a year ago. They're projected to get better by Ken Palm. Oh yeah, note on those. Those Ken Palms are projections. They're based upon last year's stats, but they're projections on this year. So don't go looking at those thinking those are last year's stats, because they're not. Anyway, they had the 6th worst adjusted offensive efficiency, which is what that metric is up here, in American Athletic Conference history last year. 6th worst in the conference's whole history. It was bad, and they had some studs, but what they had was a lot of inefficiency. Lomax and Ba, they're 2 point guards. They each had turnover rates up above 30%. Now, when I'm looking at them, I initially would think that Boogie Ellis and Lester Quinones would be the guys who would take a step forward here. I especially was looking at Quinones. However, not pictured on the sheet, because he transferred into Memphis, is Landers Nolley II. And he's the guy who I think he's the guy I think is probably going to have the best fantasy year out of these guys. He's transferred from Virginia Tech. He's had some issues, not necessarily always him, but he's had some issues with eligibility and whatnot. He's a very inconsistent player, so I am targeting him here, but not necessarily every single lineup. He likes to shoot the 3 ball, and when it's not going down, sometimes he kind of loses confidence. But overall, playing at such a high pace, I think, and how good of a player he is, I think he's a fantastic target here. In the price at 7.3, while it's high, it really could be a lot higher. That would probably push Lester Quinones, I would guess, to the bench to start. I'm sure he'll still see minutes, but it does lessen my interest in Quinones just a bit. I think at 5.7, he still has a great price, but it dampens my interest a little bit. Ba and Ellis, I don't have a ton of interest. I think they're fine. Lomax, I think they're fine. These guys are all cheap. Memphis is a team I'm mostly targeting with the pace and whatnot. When I said their offense was that bad, Ken Palm has them projected to go all the way to 66 this year. They're projected to take a huge step forward. I think a lot of that's Nolly, and a lot of that is these guys are sophomores now. They're supposed to be better. So we'll see. As far as this freshman, Musa, so I'm going to butcher a lot of names. Mostly I'm a stats guy in college basketball. Mostly I'm not able to watch 350 teams. I don't know all their names, especially incoming freshmen. So Musa Cease, we'll call him, at 5.7K. I think he's too cheap. He's a very highly touted freshman who should get a lot of blocks at 5.7K. He has some upside. And behind him, I think anybody else is fine. I think DJ Jeffries is fine. He's a little too expensive for me. I'm not sure I'm going to get there, but he's obviously fine. I think it would go Nolly 1, Jeffries 2, and then, as far as offensive looks go, I would guess Nolly 1, Jeffries 2, Quinones 3 in the guards in there as well. Boogie Ellis also getting looks. I'm not sure if the big men are going to get a ton of looks. We don't really know what they look like yet. A lot of this is projection, but I do think he'll at least be out there, and defensively could see a lot of blocks. Now behind him, the guy at 3.2 who I'm not sure what to think, but I want to throw some of them in there, is this guy Ahmad Rand. He's a JUCO transfer, and he actually led the NJCAA in blocks last year of anybody. He had the most blocks in the entire country for junior college. So I look at the depth charts, and again, there's not really depth charts, but projections, and I don't really see him on there. You look at the ones on DraftKings, and he's not even listed on there. But I don't really see why not, if he was kind of a highly touted JUCO guy. So somebody I have circled as a maybe. All right, moving on. Drake versus Kansas State. This is a game that I don't have a ton of interest in. I think it's an interesting game because Drake's a decent team. They're kind of a middle of the road team, and Kansas State is projected to be near the bottom of the Big 12 this year. So maybe there's an upset brewing. It's kind of hard to tell. When you look at Drake, the tempo's not great for either of these teams. Kansas State's good defensively, and neither of them are fantastic offensively, but not terrible. For Drake, it's Roman Penn is really the guy I'm looking at. Now at 6.3, that's a good price on him. He's clearly their go-to guy on this team. He averages 5.6 assists. He was 10th in assist rate in the entire country. So I think that's a good price. going against this good Kansas State defense, obviously you have your woes. Something I'll point out about college basketball, where my approach is a little bit different than college football. Sometimes the best value you get is on a guy who's on either a bad team or the team that's projected to be losing, going against a good team. Obviously, that has merit. Obviously, you see that in college football too. But where in college football, I'll more have stacks. Game stacks are still fine in college basketball, but you'll more have stacks and you'll fit in, a cheaper guy on a good team. It's a little bit different in college basketball. That's not always the case. Sometimes there are stars, really go-to guys with very high usage rates who are just priced way down because their team's not quite as good. I mean, here, I don't think Drake's way worse than Kansas State, so I think Penn's too cheap is what I'm trying to get there. Other than that, I don't really have much interest in any of these guys. You can see their stats all listed up there. The one I would be looking at is Murphy, Tremel Murphy. Apparently, he shot somebody in the head a few years ago. Fun fact about Tremel Murphy, not fun for the guy or girl who he shot. But anyway, it was at a house party, and he incidentally fired it, apparently. And then he came back last year, and he injured his knee. So who knows if this guy's going to be playing. I haven't really seen any final verdict. But at 4.5K, I think he's the second guy I would target. We see his stats were really good last when he played. Obviously a big if what his health is going to be, but I think he's their second guy, and he's priced way down. All right, as far as Kansas State, this team offensively, it doesn't look good. I mean, you see it there. There's nobody above 6 points in the starting lineup. I think McGurl is probably going to be the go-to guy offensively. You see how young they are with a lot of sophomores, not exactly typical of a Bruce Weber team. But McGurl, I think, is going to take a step forward. I've been kind of impressed with him from what I've seen. I think he's going to be their highest usage player, I would guess, this year, with Gordon below him, as far as what we can tell from returning production. So I think those guys are fine. McGurl's price is a little bit too expensive for me. I'm not sure how much I'm going to play in a game where they have a 277 ranked tempo, but decent. And Gordon's price, again, that's still like a little bit too expensive. I'm not sure how I feel. So I won't have a ton of this game in general. Probably Penn is the guy I'm looking towards. Nigel Pack is interesting. They kind of need him to hit right away, and he seems like he might be a good player, and he probably is going to be their starting point guard right away. So I think either Pack or this guy down here, Rudy Williams, all the way down at 4.4. I will be somewhat interested in Rudy Williams. This guy led all of junior college in assists. So we just got the guy who led junior college in blocks on Memphis. Now we have the guy who led junior college in assists on Kansas State. Kind of cool. But I'm not sure he's going to start. I'm not exactly sure how many looks he's going to get, and the team doesn't play at a very high tempo. But if he gets out there, I mean, one would imagine he would get some assists for 4.4 thousand. So decent. Overall, in general, for that game, not super thrilled. All right, Maine versus Virginia. I mean, this one's all about Maine sucks and Virginia is really good. That's as simple as I can put it, and it's correct. You look at the tempo here, 313 for Maine, Virginia 357. That's about as bad as you can possibly get for a fantasy standpoint. That tells me right there I'm going to have no Maine players unless I just get somebody in there as a lineup filler. But I think that's interesting. This guy, their best guy, the guy with pretty much only any good stats, Prijovic, isn't even listed. So I wonder what happened to transferred or dismissed from the program. I don't know. Haven't looked into it. So I'm not interested in anything there. I don't really see why I would be. Ingo, their center, would be the guy at 4,000, if anything. Centers, sometime, depending on how the teams play, are the least affected by pace. Not always the case, but usually guards are a little bit more affected. All right, as far as for Virginia, I mean, they don't play at a high pace. I'm usually not super interested in them, and they are super expensive. So I won't go crazy on this one. However, I am interested just because they're supposed to beat the brakes off Maine. So Kihei Clark, I think he's too expensive. He actually had a higher assist rate than his 2-point field goal percentage, which was really interesting. You don't see that very often. But he's kind of how their offense revolves around him. Might be better from an efficiency standpoint if it didn't. Wolditz Nacy so this team's not great shooting. And he was the one guy who really came through for them shooting, but that's kind of all he does. I guess he gets some defensive stats. Morcell was supposed to be a good freshman, but he really didn't do much last year. Other than that, Sam Hauser is really expensive at 9.2. Again, not sure how much I'll get there, but he's a great player. I think he's fine. He should dominate. He transfers over from Marquette. So keep in mind when you look at those numbers, going from a Marquette offense to a Virginia offense is about as drastic of a change as you can possibly make. Marquette just slings it all around the yard, and Virginia is the packline defense team. So keep that in mind. I do think the price on Jay Huff is too cheap. A 7.7. I see he's questionable. I think he had an ankle injury he's working through. That was as of a few weeks ago. It sounds like he's going to play, but I would monitor it. I'm definitely going to have some interest in Jay Huff. Out of those prices, he would be the one I think has the best price per value guy. 2 blocks a game last year. We saw what he did. And he's really taken a step forward. Anybody who saw Jay Huff play when he was younger at Virginia to seeing him now, now he's a stud. Other than that, whoever backs up Huff might have some value in this matchup, but it's really hard to say who that's going to be. Shedrick, redshirt freshman, is supposed to have the most upside, but I saw some sites listing Cafaro as maybe the next guy behind Huff. So if Huff sits, I play one of those guys blindly. I'm not sure who would do better. I guess Cafaro at least has some playing time, so maybe he sees the floor first, but very difficult to tell. Beekman's the backup point guard if you're looking to play backups, if you think it's going to be a blowout. Jabri Abdur-Rahim, the freshman, he's an immensely talented freshman, 6'7". I think he has the most offensive upside of these bench guys, so I'm interested in him here. Maybe they showcase him a little bit in an easy game, but Tony Bennett really doesn't like playing freshmen, so it's definitely a concern how many minutes he's going to see, but I think he has the highest upside, especially when their wings kind of struggled last year. I think if he takes off, he should get a lot of playing time this year, but that's never a given for a freshman on a Tony Bennett team. All right. This game's interesting. I'm definitely watching this one. 1 o'clock. What is this? Eastern time? Hopefully. Morning basketball over here on the West Coast. Western Kentucky versus North Iowa. These are 2 good teams. What we see here, they're both around plus 10 in adjusted efficiency margin. They're 2 good teams, and I think Western Kentucky is probably going to be even better than they were last year. And I'm not sure about Northern Iowa, but they were a good team last year, unpredictably so. As far as Western Kentucky, Tavion Hollingsworth is really their go-to guy offensively, and he's their primary ball handler, so his usage rate should be very good this year. We saw his stats from last year, mostly in scoring, but he also had 4 rebounds and 2 assists per game, which is not bad at all. Kenny Cooper, the stats look good, but he did transfer over from Lipscomb, so one wonders if his stats are going to remain the same. Likely not. Both teams are pretty good offensively, or defensively, but they're just a little bit better offensively, as we can see there. So while the tempo isn't great, especially from a Northern Iowa side, I think the prices are pretty good on some of these guys, especially a few that I'll mention. So worth targeting. I think Josh Anderson is fine on the wing at 5.8K. Hollingsworth, like I mentioned, go-to guy, primary ball handler, fine at 7.1. That's pretty good. But where I have the most interest in is at Charles Bassey at the center. Probably the team's best player. This guy's a stud. He was supposed to go to, or many people thought he was going to go to the NBA, and he opted to stay in college. And that's huge. We see there he gets steals, he gets blocks, he gets boards, he gets points, even an assist per game. At 5.4, that just must be a mispricing. I don't know what's going to be going on there. He'll be in every single one of my lineups. He'll probably be really chalky, but it's worth it. I don't really see how you can possibly fade him at 5.4. Unless you're trying to be very different, which you could if you're playing 150 and whatnot. Absolutely, but Bassey all day for me. Other than that, as far as a pay down option, Rawls, maybe Rawls. He had pretty decent stats from a year ago. He's a pretty good player. But Luke Frampton, the Davidson transfer at 3.9K, he'll be a lineup filler for me. He's a very good shooter, and this team really badly needs shooting. They're a very good team overall, and they're a deep team, but they don't always have the best shooters, and that guy is a lights-out shooter. So I think he's going to be on the floor. I think especially if they post up Bassey or Carson Williams, that's going to open up spots. I didn't really talk about Carson Williams much, but he's fine at 7.4K. I just think there are cheaper options, so maybe if you want to diversify a little bit. But no, I think he's fine. I think all these guys are fine. Bassey has more points, rebounds, about the same assists, about the same steals, and he has doubles them up in blocks. So there's no reason Bassey should be 5.4 again. I don't know. All right, as far as Northern Iowa, the main guys you want to look at here are A.J. Green and Austin Fife. A.J. Green at 8,000. That's not the greatest price I would like to see, but he has a very, very high usage rate. It was one of the highest in college basketball last year. As far as the team, this team shoots 41% of their attempts are threes, and they make 38.6% of them. So they take a lot of threes, and they made a lot of threes last year. But Green is the go-to guy. He's the ball handler on pretty much every possession, and he takes a lot of shots. So at 8,000, that's fine. Austin Fife, I mean, I guess you have to worry how he's going to go up against these Kentucky big guy or Western Kentucky big guys, but that's mostly Bassey. So, I mean, it's college basketball. Bassey's not going to be out there for 40 minutes. He might get in foul trouble. Who knows? So Fife is fine, and we see they're pretty well-rounded stats. Other than that, Burhow at 6.8K is decent. I'd probably just play up for Green personally, but I think any of these guys, I mean, they're the very clear top three guys, and they all returned from a year ago. We see Fife's decently well-rounded stats there. So, or Burhow, sorry. All right, moving on. Oklahoma State versus Texas Arlington, and I guess I kind of buried the lead here because got that over here. Cade Cunningham might be the best freshman in college basketball. Judging by the way some people are talking about him and from what I've seen in the highlights, he might be the best freshman college basketball player in a while. He's the stud. He does it all. 6'8", he can run the point. He's like a guard, very versatile. He's going to fill up the stat sheet week in and week out, and I feel pretty good about that. So I'm going to have Cade Cunningham in pretty much all my lineups, especially because I don't want to be sitting there on the couch watching these games and not having Cade Cunningham in my lineup, as he looks like a future number 1 overall pick, as most expect him to be. So Cunningham's a stud. The tempo is decent for these two teams. I think with Oklahoma State having two very good guards with him and like Kuechly, I think they are going to run a little bit more, I would guess. They're projected to be 39th in offense, which is very good, and 31st in defense. So Oklahoma State's projected to take a big step forward this year. Most of that due to Cunningham. Williams is eligible. So no one of these guys. Donovan Williams is too cheap at 4.2 way down there. He's too cheap. Talented freshman. And I think he transferred in. I'm not sure why his eligibility was in question. I don't remember. Rondale Walker was a top 100 recruit, and he might get playing time. So he's down even a little bit further at 4,000. So if you need a lineup filler, this is a game I'm going to have some interest in. I think Cade Cunningham's going to open up the offense, and you should get guys open looks. And Boone, their big man at 6,000, I think is fine. We see there his stats were not great from a year ago, but I would expect those to take a step forward. Some guys were talking like it might be a breakout year. It would make sense. Oh, shoot. They have two Boones, Caleb Boone and Keelan Boone. I assume they were talking about Caleb. I didn't realize they had two Boones. Interesting. I guess I'm out on the know of Oklahoma State. Going to be watching them now because they have Cade Cunningham. Anyway, this guy Flavors transfers over from Cal Baptist. So Cal Baptist to Big 12, big step up. But he is 38% from deep on over 450 attempts. So when I see that kind of shooting, and I know he's going to have two good guards getting him the ball, one who averaged 4.5 assists, which is very good in college basketball, and now Cade Cunningham, he should get looks. So I think Flavors is fine. You know, his price up there at 6.6, that's not great from a three-point guy, mainly a three-point guy, but, you know, I think he'll have some decent games, so definitely not crossing him off. All right, as far as Arlington, Azor is their clear top returner, top ball handler. We see of returners, he leads them in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. No, Mwamba down there, barely got him in blocks, but yeah, he leads them in the other four. He's the clear top guy. Let's bring up the pricing here. Yeah, clear top guy at 5.9 thousand. So I think I like him in this matchup. Should be a back and forth affair, I would guess. The other two are Griffin and Phillips, so the clear 1 and 2 behind him, in my opinion, and I think they're too cheap at 4.1 to 4,000. So I don't hate anybody here. I think I'll probably own Azor the most out of those guys, but the pricing is good on all of them. All right, Bowling Green versus Michigan. Again, Bowling Green's expected to roll, but Bowling Green is projected by some outlets to be first in the MAC. So they're not a bad spot at all. We see here the tempo's good. Bowling Green likes to run at 71. Michigan likes to run a little bit as well. As far as on the Bowling Green side of things, we have Justin Turner is the guy you want to look to at 5.3. He's too cheap. 18.8 points per game a year ago, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, almost had a steal per game, and even had a few blocks. So he is, I'm not sure why he's that cheap. I guess they're playing Michigan. Michigan's good. They're projected to be 30th in defense by Ken Palm. But that's too cheap for a guy who's their clear-cut go-to guy and is returning. Other than that, the other guy I'm going to be looking at is Plowden. He's their clear number 2 guy. He had 8 rebounds a year ago as a 6'6" guy, kind of a wing. He chipped in with 12 points, you see there, and he really chips in defensively, which is why I liked him. Good, solid player. So I think with those defensive stats, I think he has a safer floor than you would imagine. So I like both Turner and Plowden. I think Turner's a little bit the guy I would target just a little bit more. All right, on the Michigan side of things, the pricing. So they're losing Xavier Simpson and John Teskey. So who's going to step up? When Simpson sat last year, let's see if I can pull that up. The Xavier Simpson effect. Got this from the 3-Man Weave. Shout out 3-Man Weave. It looks like they got their info from Hoop Explorer. Anyway, we can see here that the usage rates went up for these guys, except for Brooks, for Livers and Wagner. They're 2 most expensive guys. But the offensive rating was still good for Livers and Brooks, but not for Wagner. Wagner's turnover percent went from 11.1 to 30.8 without Simpson. So what that tells me is who's going to take the reins over this year. Now, while I said that, Brooks is supposed to be the point guard, so I think he's fine at 7.8. I think Franz Wagner still has the highest upside of these guys, and while he wasn't great without Simpson, I think he should take a step forward. He has a pretty clear high upside if you watch him play the game of basketball. So I think at 9.1, he deserves to be their most expensive guy. Now, that's really expensive. I'd rather have Cade Cunningham. If I can fit both in, that's fine. He's the guy I'm going to look to target. Livers is fine. He shoots threes at a very high rate. He plays good defense. We see his stats there. They're pretty good, but I just think Wagner has a higher ceiling, especially fantasy-wise. But Livers is great. I just don't think I can pay that at 8.3 for a guy whose primary value comes defensively and through 3 balls. Other than that, not much interest in Brown for me. So Mike Smith is a transfer from Columbia. He put up huge stats. You can see there on the sheet, 22 points per game. But that was at Columbia, so we don't know if he's going to take over point guard duties. My guess would be he'd come off the bench. So maybe. You see his stats there, pretty phenomenal. All right, but the center position, somebody's going to be valuable at the center position. Now, whether it's Davis or whether it's this freshman Dickinson, 7'1" freshman, supposed to be a beast, one of these guys probably has a good year. They don't have Simpson getting him the ball in the pick and roll, but either one of those guys is fine. Am I going to target either one in this matchup? Yeah, maybe. Do I know who? No, not really. It's the first week. It's very difficult to know what to expect. Both of them could have value in the spot. I think they're both fine. Overall, I think Michigan's the toughest team to tell what to do with in this slate. I think everybody else is relatively straightforward. I think I'm paying up for Wagner if I can, and other than that, maybe the center would be my most owned guys from their side. All right, that wraps up that early slate. Again, when I'm looking at lineups, I'm probably going to fit Cunningham and then anybody else I mentioned in play. I think Nolly's fine, Wagner's fine, Bassey. I'll start my lineups with Cade Cunningham and Bassey, and probably one of the Bowling Green guys. All right, let's exit that out. Bingo. And let's go to the main slate. I made this sheet, and then a few games got canceled and switched around, and a whole mess. But, why is that over there? I guess I did my sheet differently. Okay, let me see what I can do about that, fellas. I am just going to make it go over here for now. Okay, anyway, first game up, we have Liberty versus Purdue. You can see here on the sheet, these tempos are disgusting. Not really something I'm going to be looking to target a whole lot. Liberty was a good team last year. They do lose their two best players, Holmesley and James. Oh, my mic is breakdancing. They lose their four highest usage rate players actually from a year ago. So somebody's going to step up. The guess would be their top returner, statistic-wise, Darius McGee. He's only 5'9", going against Purdue. I guess they don't have their 7-footers that they always have back there, but they're still a big physical team. I'm not sure how great he'll do in this spot, but I do have ownership interest in him. Darius McGee. Other than that, I would think Cuffey would be the next guy up. Both of those guys might have decent years, but overall, not a matchup I'm looking to target. As far as Purdue, so Eric Hunter Jr. was supposed to be the guy who was taking over, but I think he's going to be out for a few weeks, judging on the last news I saw. So Hunter's not going to play. That means there's going to be value at the guard spots. Stefanovic is more of a shooter, so he's fine, but I think somebody is going to take over as a lead ball handler. I think Thompson's going to shoot more a lot this year, but his stats weren't great from a year ago, so I'm not sure how much you can rely on him. So as far as who's going to step up, sounds like true freshman Ethan Morton. I have a quote here pulled from 3-Man Weave. Their coach, Matt Painter, called Morton the best passer I've ever recruited, and he's a 6'6" wing. So that's a big claim. So maybe he steps up with Hunter out. Other than that, Jordan Ivey is another highly touted freshman at 6.4. Maybe he starts at point. Not sure. And Brandon Newman should be a key rotation piece after learning the offense last year. Former 100 recruit. So those guys will get a bump in value. As far as who is the best game, I don't know. If I had to take a guess, maybe on Morton, just based on the coach's thoughts, but it's hard to tell. It's a crapshoot. Travion Williams is their clear-cut go-to number one guy. He was 38th nationally in usage rate a year ago. He's a good efficient scorer down low. I think he's fine in this matchup. If we take a look at pricing, I guess I have to bring this over. Ooh, risky. There we go. Sorry, fellas, going on the fly. We'll do it live. As far as pricing, okay, Travion Williams obviously is really expensive. It looks like Hunter is confirmed out at 9.2, but if you can get there, like I said, he's a clear-cut number one guy. Stefanovic, more of a three-point shooter. I'm not sure. Again, this game I'm not targeting very much in general. I think if I took a flyer on Morton or Ivy would be what I would do. It sounds like Morton might not play. So if Morton might not play and Hunter's out, I don't hate a chance on Ivy at 4.8 at all. If you don't like Ivy, maybe Newman at 4.5. And that probably bumps up Thompson as well. Thompson, I guess, would be the safest. Again, his stats weren't great from a year ago, but at least he has returning production. And on the Liberty side of things, it's mostly McGee at 5.2. Maybe Cuffey, 4.9. All right, Moorhead versus Kentucky. Got to make this go away again. Sorry, fellas. Didn't anticipate that. I forgot to put that over there. All right, Moorhead State. No good at all. You see their Ken Palm ratings. There's not really much to talk about. They were 348th nationally in three-point percentage, so they sucked at shooting, 27.3% from deep, and they ranked 336 in free throws at 63.8, so they can't shoot, and Ken Palm has them 316, so they can't really play defense either, so it should be a blowout for Kentucky. Both of their primary ball handlers departed this offseason as well. When I see that, that tells me I don't want anything to do with this team. You can see there the stats if you want to take a flyer on any of those guys. Be my guest. Maybe a lineup filler. All right, for Kentucky, 94% of their scoring walks out the door. Only one significant player on the roster returns. That's sophomore Keon Brooks. So a lot of new faces, but that's what we're used to with Kentucky, right? They have the star freshman. Askew should be running the point. BJ Boston, more of a shooting guard. I think Boston is the most likely candidate to lead this team in scoring. So I think Boston's where I'm going to be primarily looking to here. Maybe Askew second. And Terrence Clark is more of a defensive guy, and he's supposed to be pretty darn good as well. Other than that, Davian Mintz, transfer from Creighton, coming off the bench. Good shooter, good versatile player, should see some run. But bearing the lead, Olivier Sarr transfers from Wake Forest. There's been a lot of talk about how good actually is this guy, going from a Danny Manning team to a John Calipari team. But bottom line, he's playing Morehead State, so maybe we won't find that out till later. We can see his stats there are pretty darn good from when he was playing at Wake Forest. So I think Sarr and Boston are the top two guys, and then Askin and Clark. Looking at pricing, again, Morehead guys, I'm not going to show because why? I like Boston as their third most expensive guy, and I like Sarr as well. I think if you can fit either of those guys. Other than that, I think Clark and Askew are where I would look to. Paying down. Sounds like Keon Brooks is out. Ooh, I didn't see that until now. That might open the doors for one of these backup bigs. You could take a look at them. I think that bumps Sarr's value even a little bit more. Mint 6'4", maybe not. So I think one of Ware, Fletcher, Allen, or Toppin. I think that's Obi Toppin's brother. I think one of those guys is going to see increased value. So I think a flyer on those guys is fine. All right, moving on. This is a big slate, so I'll try to go faster. Charleston versus UNC. Obvious interest in UNC here. They play at a very high pace. You can see up there, number 42 in pace, and they have some very good big men. Pretty much all their best guys are big men this year. Charleston, not supposed to be great offensively, not great defensively, and they play at a slow pace. So really not much interest in Charleston. They do lose their number one guy, Grant Riller. And they had terrible on-off splits for Riller last year. When he didn't play, they were bad. Well, hate to break it to you fellas, but Riller's not playing all year because he's in the NBA now. They only have 3 proven rotation players returning, so not really much I'm looking to. Galloway was 14th nationally in steal rate, and he's their leading returning scorer. So I think Galloway, if I'm playing anybody, it's going to be Galloway. Other than that, Peyton Willis is a Minnesota transfer. I think I would guess, would be their second best guy. But it's kind of a crapshoot from there. All right, Lorenzo Edwards looks decent as well. All right. UNC, Caleb Love, the freshman, transfers in, supposed to be the next great UNC point guard. Everything I can read about him seems like the guy's a stud, so I'm going to have ownership here. But they really played through their big men. Like I said, like all their best guys are big men. Garrison Brooks is the best of the bunch. You can see there statistically what he's put up, 16, 8, 2, and then a stock per game, half a steal, half a block, combines for 1 full stock. Baycott should be the guy who sees the second most playing time, 9, 8, 1, half, and then 1 and 1. So he's fine. Leaky Black is their other starter. He's decent. He has a good floor maybe for cash games, but I think his price is a little prohibitive, and he hasn't really shown that he has much of an offensive game. Anthony Harris, we haven't seen much from him. He would be more of a flyer, but he should have looks in this offense. Other than that, I'm not looking to their bench too much. A backup big could have value, but I don't really think I'm going to need to get there in this slate, so I haven't looked into him all that much because I think the prices are okay. Baycott at 6.9, that's a decent price. Black at 6.3, maybe in cash. Sterling Manley at 3.7. If I knew he was going to play, I'd have some interest. But Caleb Love at 8.3 and Brooks at 9.3 are the clear studs. You can pay up to get there. Sounds like Harris is going to be out. I think that increases Love a little more and increases Black maybe a little bit more. And it should give one of these freshmen time, some more playing time. All right, Eastern Michigan versus Michigan State. Oh, I just went over those without pricing because you can't see. Sorry about that. Garrison Brooks is 9.3 and Caleb Love is 8.3. Leaky Black 6.3. Baycott 6.9. As far as Charleston, Galloway's 4.5, and I think he's their clear top guy. So, all right, moving on. Yes, we're back. Hey, it's the first week I'm doing this basketball style, so give me a break. By the way, give me a comment if anybody's still watching this point. I know this is the first one I've done this, but give me a comment below what you think. Would you like to see more of the sheet? Keep in mind I should have player stats out eventually once we have player stats. Would you just like to see the DraftKings view like I do for college football? Let me know. Again, this is my first time doing this. Any advice you guys can give me, anything I didn't pick up on, I'm sure I'll notice it when I watch this. But recording it live, I'm sure I'm missing something or not seeing it. So let me know, by all means. Okay, as far as this game goes, Eastern Michigan, not great offensively, but they are decent defensively. We can see in the Ken Bomb projections, but their tempo is not very good. So Michigan State, one of the better teams in college basketball. So when I'm looking at this, what this tells me is Grossi, however you say that, he's their top guy. He went from a 12% to a 22% usage rate, so that jumps, and it should jump again. Sounds like he's a better defender than a creator, from what I've read about the guy. So maybe that usage rate jumping isn't the best thing, but he's their top returner, and his price is only 4.5. Other than that, James Love, their center, is from Kansas State. I think he was the guy involved in that Kansas State fight from a while ago. So fun guy. But they're going to look to slow the pace this year. I mean, Love's a huge question mark. We haven't seen him. But his price is only $3,000. Whoa, $3,000. So maybe a pump play. McBride, where is he? Bryce McBride down here. He was a 24-point per game JUCO scorer, and looks like they could really use some offensive options on this team. Like I said, Grossi's not really supposed to be an offensive guy, it sounds like, but he was forced into that role last year. So there's a chance McBride pays out here. And when we look at his price, is he also min price? He is also min priced. Again, we're not sure what the playing time is going to be like. It's the first game, but if you're looking to take a flyer, either Love or McBride doesn't look like a bad option. I see Love listed as questionable there, so I'm gonna take a look at that later. I didn't notice that till now. All right, as far as Michigan State, we can see their players here. Josh Langford is their most expensive guy. I'm not sure I would get there since he's coming off injury, and in general, I'm not sure what his upside is. He's a fine player. He's a good player. You can see his stats there, but I'm not sure what the upside is as a primarily a scorer. Rocket Watts should see a jump in usage. I think this team's going to be finding their identity early. They have a transfer, Joey Hauser, the Hauser brother from Marquette. We saw the other one earlier at Virginia. So it's really difficult to get a read on him. Aaron Henry is fine. This guy always flashes, oozes potential. We could see he stuffs the stat sheet, but not exactly as much as you would see. You'll see games where you're like, how does this guy not average 20 points per game? And then you'll play him at DraftKings, and he'll get you nothing much. So a big man's probably going to step up, but it's not for sure it's going to be Bingham at 6,000. It could be any of these guys below him. So where I would look, this is a difficult one. I'm not sure Watts is worth that price tag. It's not like he's going to step up and be Cassius Winston. I think Hauser has actually pretty good price at 6.6. I think Henry at 6.4, maybe. Langford, I'm not sure I want to play him in his first game coming back off injury. So this team's really hard to tell. If Hoggard gets playing time, which he should, it sounds like maybe at 4.5 he's decent. But other than that, it's pretty much just throw your hand in the hat, see what comes out. Throw the names in the hat, throw your hand in, see what comes out. Moving on. Oh, Villanova was... Oh, I thought this one was canceled. Okay. I guess not. Still up here. All right, so Villanova, we can see here I'll go faster for these. The tempo is not great for Villanova. For Boston College, not great, but not really sure what to expect with the Boston College team. They have a lot of transfers coming in and whatnot, some new players. Their top guys for Villanova are obviously Gillespie. He stepped up in the point guard position. You can see his stats there, 13, 3, and 4. That's fine. Justin Moore behind him as a pretty good shooting guard. Jermaine Samuels. They're just a well-rounded team. These guys are all fine. The top two guys are pretty clearly Gillespie and Robinson Earl. The usage rates, Gillespie was at 24.5. Moore was at 21.6, and then behind them, Robinson Earl was at 18.8. So we didn't see Robinson Earl's usage rate be very high. He was still productive, but I mean that usage rate is going to have to go up if he's going to be, a stud fantasy player this year. So maybe it will. He has a year under his belt, but hard for me to play him at that price. So anyone here? I think they're fine. This guy Daniels is transferring in from Tulane. We see his stats there at Tulane. He was very productive. I don't think that's a bad price. Moore's price is decent. They're fine. I'm not like super excited about Villanova, so I'm not going to start my lineups with them or anything, but they're fine. As far as Boston College, what you want to be looking at here is Winston Tabbs. He missed last year, but you can see his stats there. He was their go-to guy. And it's going to be him and Stephon Mitchell are probably going to be shooting a lot and having a very high usage rate, I would guess. So I think those guys are fine. Karnick at 4.7 is probably low price. Those stats look good, but that was at Lehigh. That's going to be a lot different playing Villanova, so I don't love him, but I think he's too cheap. Boston College guys in general in this game, everybody just seems a little too high priced. I think they're fine, but the prices are a little worrisome. All right, West Virginia. I think I have this one. I just labeled it wrong. There we go. West Virginia, South Dakota State. This was new. So West Virginia last year, they stopped pressing. They still generated turnovers at a top 30 rate. And then this guy McBride was great to start the year, and then he really tailed off. So not really sure what to do with this team. Their big men are the two best players on their team, Culver and Shabiwi. Oh man, I don't know how to say his name. That's bad because he's one of the better players in college basketball. But anyway, you can see they both get blocks, both get steals. This guy Johnson coming in, Kedrian Johnson, he was the third-ranked JUCO prospect, so it's hard for me to believe he's not going to see the floor, and he is min-priced. I'm going to play me some Kedrian Johnson, I think. Again, these are risky plays, but if you need a min-price guy, I like him. I think Shabiwi should. Oh man, I'm butchering now. I'm gonna stop saying it. My boy Oscar and Culver, I think, are both fine. The tempo's decent for West Virginia, and South Dakota State's always been a team that has better offense than they have defense. So this game might be sneaky. It's difficult to know where to attack it from, but I think anybody's fine in this one. I think the big men are the clear number one, number two. McBride maybe at 6.8, and then I like Johnson as a punt. Emmett Matthews probably is too cheap at 4,000. He should start. He was inconsistent last year, but he had some good games here and there. All right, as far as South Dakota State, I don't love this matchup. I mean, you see West Virginia's projected to be 7th in defense. They have a very good offense. South Dakota State does, but I'm not sure they're good enough to justify playing a ton of them. However, Douglas Wilson, we saw he went off last year for 18 and 6. I'm a little worried because this team was third nationally in 2-point percentage, and a lot of that came from post-ups. They were 98th in the 98th percentile on post-ups, including passes. So that's a big part of their game, and West Virginia has some good big men, good defensive big men at that as well. So I think that's skunk. Doesn't work great in South Dakota's favor in this one. Other than that, Dentlingers, the other guy, this guy can shoot the ball. We see there he has 1.3 blocks, so he's a good player. Can score, rebound, shoot, get blocks. So I think he's fine at 6,000. I still think Wilson is definitely the better play for only $400 more. He might struggle in the matchup, or he might just shoot 20 times until he gets his. Who knows? And this guy, Apic, is he another mid-price guy? Apple. Butchered your name, bro. Sorry. He was a second-team All-American in JUCO. So there's a chance he transfers in and plays. There's a chance he doesn't play at all at 3,000. I like Johnson more, but I think Apple's fine as well. All right, Texas, over on to the Rio Grande Valley versus Texas. Rio Grande Valley plays at a very high pace. You see there, 36th projected in KenPom. Not good offensively at all, 288. Whereas Texas is projected to have a very good defense, 4th overall in the country. So that automatically means I'm probably crossing off Rio Grande. It looks like they're on the bottom there. Oh, this guy Levi, 6.2. That's not a terrible price. He actually led the country in assists last year. They returned 74% of last year's minutes for what it's worth. Johnson and Freeman should see a bump in usage as well. So Johnson at 4,000 is probably too cheap, and Freeman at 3.4 is definitely too cheap. Well, I don't know if I go that far. Freeman's stats, now I'm looking at them, were not great last year. So Johnson, maybe decent. Yeah, not a lot excites me. I guess you could pay up for Levi with his assists. That's what I'll say. And he gets a lot of steals, 2.4 per game, as you saw. As far as Texas, they have 3 pretty good guards, Coleman, Ramey, and Jones. I'm not sure Coleman should be that much more than them at 9.1. But again, this is a matchup they should probably smash in. So, again, it's really hard for me to play a guy at Coleman that expensive, but maybe. I think Ramey at 7.6, that price is decent. We see there he had 10, 3, and 2 a year ago. That's okay. And then Jones, obviously battling back from leukemia. Maybe he improves as he gets healthier at 6.2. As far as the usage rate from a year ago, Baker was at 26.4. Jones 25.6, Ramey 22, and then Coleman 22.1. So it's actually interesting that Coleman's usage rate was the third highest of those guards, but he's the highest price guy. I don't think he justifies that high price at all. But in a smash spot, I mean, he could. That's the thing. He could pay it back. So difficult to know there. Other than that, Greg Brown, the freshman, should see playing time, but he's priced all the way up at 8,000. So I don't know. Good recruit there. Sims, I'm not sure he's worth that price point, but he's a good big man. You can see his stats there on the screen for you. And Febreze, I doubt it's Febreze. Stay fresh. It wasn't cleared for full contact, so don't play him. Sounds like he's out. All right. Clemson versus MSU. I think that's Mississippi State, yeah. Not a good tempo on this one, so I'm not really targeting this one. And you see both teams are better offensively. Well, that's not true. Mississippi State is better offensively than defensively, but it's close. Both teams have a pretty good defense. Mississippi State loses a ton, whereas Clemson looks like they return some decent guys. That projection is surprising for their offense because they were miserable a year ago. They should have a deep rotation. Playing time is a big question mark. This guy PJ Hall was a top 50 recruit. So he's really taken a flyer at 6.3K, but I don't know if he should be quite that cheap. And Amir Sims is their clear-cut number one guy, 13, 7, and 2 from a year ago with about a steal and a block per game. He led the team in points, rebounds, assists, and blocks from a year ago. That price isn't great in a team with that slow of tempo, but he's a beast. As far as Mississippi State, so the other guys on Clemson, I don't have a ton of interest in. I think Newman's a little bit too cheap at 6.2. I think maybe he should be their second most expensive guy. I think it should go Sims, and then Hall and Newman at the same price, which it looks like they're about an honors close, so I guess that's not that bad. As far as Mississippi State, they should see a decent offensive drop-off this year after losing their 4 best players. Jalen Johnson transfers in, and his stats look good, but again, that was with Louisiana. That's a big step up. I think Abdul Adu, 6.1K. You can see he had 1.9 blocks from a year ago, and that wasn't really receiving full playing time. So I think he's decent at 6.1. I'm not sure I would pay for any of these guys. This guy, Devon Smith, freshman, I think he's like a little guy. He's like 6 feet tall, but he has some crazy dunking highlights. But I don't know if that's going to mean he's going to be an effective point guard, and maybe not in this matchup. So overall, I'm not very interested in maybe Adu, and then maybe one of those Clemson guys I mentioned. Utah State. I think they're on here. There we go. Utah State versus Wichita State. This is a game I'm interested in. It should be back and forth. I'm excited to watch this one. I think these two teams are pretty even. Ken Palm has them projected pretty even, with Utah State being a slightly better team, and the tempo is decent for both teams. The big men are great on Utah State, but the backcourt is definitely a big question mark. I'd assume they might slow it down a little bit this year. That's just a guess because they're a great rebounding team and they're good defensively, and the front court appears to be way stronger than the backcourt. So could somebody step up in that backcourt? Absolutely they could, but I don't know who it's going to be. So that would just be me guessing. This guy, Stephen Ashworth, is only priced at 3.7, and he was supposed to be really good coming out of high school. Reason he doesn't have any stats is that he was on a 2-year Latter-day Saints mission. Does he come back and seize the reins? Week 1, he could, or he could not play. It's a toss-up. Who knows? One of those guys will probably have value, but am I interested in tossing up? Not really. Miller at 5,000. 8-point returner. Their top returning scorer. Him and Anderson are pretty close in the backcourt, so maybe. But the big man is where you should have interest. Keita, I'm butchering all these names. I'm a stat nerd, sorry, I don't always say these names. I'll learn them for next time. But at 5.9, he's way too cheap. He's a beast. 13 and 7. Actually had a decent 2 assists per game as well from a year ago, and this guy gets a lot of blocks. You see, he averaged 1.7 blocks per game. He's a stud. He hasn't been healthy in his career, but he's supposed to be healthy for this one. I love Keita at a 5.9, one of my favorite plays. That's similar to the Bassey play on the other slate. Other than that, Justin Bean is a stud. You see there, he averaged a double-double. He gets steals, he gets blocks, he gets assists. He's a stud at 8.2. I'll probably more pay down for Keita, but I think they're both fine. As far as Wichita State, they had a mess of an offseason. They had 3 starting underclassmen all transfer out. And then obviously their head coach, Greg Marshall, he's still listed here, but he got canned. They have a new guy. I don't remember the new guy's name off the top of my head. They were 8th defensively in KenPom last year, so they're projected to take a pretty substantial step back all the way to 81. When we're looking at them here, I think Alterique Gilbert is going to be their top guy. I watched him at UConn, and I was pretty impressed with him, but he was not efficient at all. So that could be a struggle of their offense, but he's very talented. He has some nice finishes at the rim. He averaged almost 4 assists at UConn, as you can see there. So I think he's going to be their top guy. Other than that, this guy Dexter Dennis is a gunner. He's a shooter, 36.6 on nearly 300 attempts in his career. So he should see some looks. And Tyson Etienne, not Travis Etienne, but he's interesting as well. He plays some good defense, and he's a good 3-and-D guy, but the usage rate, it really isn't all that great. So when I'm looking at them, Porter and Wade were top 100 JUCOs. I'm not super interested, but I think Alterique Gilbert is definitely too cheap. So I'm going to play some Gilbert at 5.3. I don't know if I'll get to Dennis at 6.6. And the big men are really a toss-up. The big men really haven't proven anything. This game's off due to COVID. Okay, don't know when that happens, but I just saw that news now, so I just wasted my time and wasted your time on that game. Sorry. Anyway, moving on. Georgia Tech versus Georgia State. Anyway, I like this game. You see the tempo there, 30 and 92 projected. That's really good. Both teams are projected to have a top 100 offense in KenPom, whereas Georgia Tech's the better defensive team. So I'm going to have some interest. Alvarado and DeVoe are the top guys for Georgia Tech. Oh, I thought that was Georgia Tech's pricing. I got excited. They're both expensive. They're both fine. I don't really have a huge preference between them. You can see their stats there. DeVoe had more points, more rebounds, slightly less assists, a full less steal. So it's close. There's not much separating them. Most people think Alvarado's the better player. Other than that, I won't have a ton of interest. You look at there, Moses Wright is definitely the third guy. Those are the clear top 3. He's their best big man for sure. You can see the stats. Bubba Parham was supposed to be a good shooter, and he came in last year, and he couldn't shoot at all. Transferred in from VMI. And he was good on VMI. I owned him in my season-long leagues there. So maybe. But he would have to get hot, and he wasn't good last year. Other than that, as far as Georgia State guys I'm looking at, you can see their stats there. They returned 4 starters from a top 130 KenPom team. They were last in the Sun Belt, and they were last in the Sun Belt in defensive rebounding rate, so they might get killed on the offensive glass, which might give Moses Wright a bump there. But it's Kane Williams, Corian Allen, and Justin Roberts are their clear top guys, and they all have pretty similar stats there, with Kane Williams being the leading scorer and the leading assist guy, and actually leading rebound and steals and blocks. So Kane Williams is their guy. 6.1K, I think he deserves to be priced that way, but Roberts and Allen are very, very, very hot on his tails. I think either one of these guys are fine. Looking at the stats, it's pretty close, but I would give a slight edge to Roberts at only $200 more. Other than that, I'm not going to play their big men. If I'm playing a big man in this game, JoJo Toppin. That's not another Toppin brother, is it? I'm going to have to look into these Toppin brothers. Anyway. So some decent interest in the guards in that game, then maybe Moses Wright as well. All right, Eastern Washington versus Oregon. Oregon has a pretty good team, and Eastern Washington is actually supposed to be pretty solid themselves. Oregon plays at a slow pace, whereas Eastern Washington plays at a very high pace, so it'll be interesting to see which plays out here. Oregon's supposed to be top 30 in both offense and defense per KenPom, so they're definitely better than Eastern Washington here. Their tempo is going to be interesting to watch. Their tempo. So they went from 197 to 290 to 7 a year ago, Eastern Washington. That's a huge leap. We see Ken Palm projecting him 34, so still on the higher side. It'll be interesting to see if this guy, Magnuson, takes a sophomore leap. We saw he had 4 assists per game, but only about 5.8 points. So maybe. I don't think I'm going to get there. I mean, at 3.7, you're getting a starting point guard who averaged 4 assists per game. Again, I don't love it because he only averaged 5.8 points. He's playing against a good Oregon team who likes to slow the tempo, but interesting. As far as this guy Tanner Groves, he's 98th percentile on post-ups, so he probably sees more looks this year with some other guys graduating. So Groves at 3.5 I think is too cheap. That might be my preferred play. He had half a block per game last year. I think he's going to get more looks. I think he's fine. Kim Aiken at 5,000 was there. You can see there he averaged 34 points per game last year. He averaged 13 points, almost 10 rebounds, almost a double-double, and he had 2.7 stocks per game. So Kim Aiken at 5,000 I think is too cheap. Is it a tough matchup? Absolutely, but he's too cheap. All right, and Eastern Washington was 19th in 3-point attempts allowed, so they allow teams to chuck. So maybe some 3-point shooters on Oregon see a slight bump, like maybe Duarte sees a slight bump. As far as Oregon goes, they are going to miss Peyton Pritchard, so it's anybody's guess what the team's going to look like. As far as I last checked, LJ Figueroa, the pretty heralded transfer in from St. John's. We still haven't heard whether he's going to play or not. Most people are assuming he's going to receive the waiver, but there hasn't been a ruling, so it's tough to tell. As far as the pricing goes here, I think Will Richardson taking over point guard duties. He was pretty inconsistent last year, but showed some very good stretches. It's going to be interesting to see whether he's actually a good shooter or not. He was 47% from deep a year ago, but only 28% in his freshman year, so maybe he's somewhere in between. But overall, I think he has a pretty high potential. Maybe he'll be able to reach that against Eastern Washington. I think he's way too cheap at 6.4, so I will have some ownership of Richardson. Duarte's fine, like I said, he's a good 3-point shooter. Averaged 12 and 5 a year ago, had 1.7 steals and half a block, so pretty good player. 6.9, I think he's fine. They have Eric Williams and Omori transferring in from Duquesne and Rutgers, respectively. They're both fine. They're both kind of switchable, positionless basketball players. It's going to be really a mess to see how this front court rotation minutes get split out. So I think either one of those guys is too cheap, but I don't really know which one. Maybe they're both too cheap is the answer. But I think they're both fine. Like, we don't even know if they're going to start. As far as Amari Hardy, he's priced all the way up at 6.1. He was a very good player at UNLV. You see his stats there, 14, 3, and 3. So I would guess he would come off the bench with Duarte and Richardson starting. But maybe he earns a spot on the wing. Maybe one of those Williams and Amari sits. It's really difficult to tell. This is a very deep team, especially up front. They're deep, but who's going to be the star? Nobody knows. All right. As far as other than that, we have N'Faly Dante. From Mali. This guy was supposed to be a big recruit, and he really didn't do much a year ago, and he's been injured. He's been dealing with a lot of troubles. He actually had a higher foul rate than block rate a year ago. Yeah, higher foul rate than block rate. So it's difficult to trust him. He's too cheap at 5.9 probably, but he could totally bust. So very risky. I think overall Richardson's my favorite play in this game, and everybody else I mentioned is fine. If LJ Figueroa does get cleared, I think he's interesting. I'm not sure I would own him. Finding out on that late notice on a deep team. But he's probably, he might be their best player if he plays. All right, UCLA versus San Diego State. Not a game I'll spend too much time on. You see the tempo there. UCLA is projected all the way at 344th, a Mick Cronin team, and San Diego State is all the way at 314th. So both good defensive teams, and this should be a good game. This should definitely be a good game. Two defensive-minded teams. San Diego State famously, was going for the undefeated season a year ago. They're not really projected to be there this year, but still a good team. As far as UCLA goes, Tiger Campbell, their point guard, 6.8K. It's not a terrible price. I'm not going to have a ton of ownership. One of only 7 players with an assist to turnover ratio of 2.75 and over 150 assists. So he's a good ball handler, makes good decisions. Not super athletic or anything, but he gets the job done. Johnny Juzang could have a big year coming over from Kentucky. He's a gunner, or he could not because he's did nothing at Kentucky. So the main interest I'm going to be looking in here. So yeah, Chris Smith is playing. He's not listed here on the sheet, but he is coming back. I think he's fine. 7.3. I'm not really going to get there. but he's fine. But Jalen Hill, I think, is the top play per price at 5.8. He's their big guy. He's been a little bit underwhelming, but he's a big body. You can see right there, he gets 1.7 stocks per game, 9 points, 6.9 rebounds. So I think Jalen Hill is the best price. And then below him, Cody Riley, the big man, also gets minutes. You can see the stats there, 8-4, and then about a stock per game. And I think he'll see a decent amount of playing time probably. The wings, they rotate too much. Chris Smith is the best one, like I mentioned. But Jaquez, Singleton, and these other guys, Kyman, Bernard, they rotate them too much. Cronin's trying to get the best defensive effort and the freshest legs. So from a fantasy perspective, not super interesting. As far as San Diego State goes, I'm probably not going to play much of them. I think Shackle and Mitchell are the top two guys. I do think Mitchell's the best of them at 7.3. It's a little pricey for a slow tempo. Gomez transfers in from Cal State Northridge. I don't know if we can expect him to put up those stats at 5.8 against UCLA, a good defensive team. But if you want to take a flyer, I think he's too expensive. But I think Mitchell, Shankle's a little too cheap at 5.6, and then Mensah at 6,000. If he's actually healthy, he's supposed to be a good player. 6.9 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 2.5 stocks per game. So if I'm playing here, probably Mensah or Mitchell, and then on the other side, UCLA, I like Jalen Hill the best and Cody Riley second, as just from a pricing standpoint. All right, folks, that wraps it up. I think it went a little long. I'll work on this format going forward. As I said, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a like, if you can subscribe, if you like what you're seeing. I know there's not a lot of college DFS stuff, so that's why I've been doing football, but there's even less college basketball DFS, so let me know what you think. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of the College Basketball Breakdown Show. So see you guys. Have a good Thanksgiving.